You are about to hear a story where every fact is true, but the truth feels impossible. It starts with a question so simple, you'll answer it instantly, and ends with a question so complicated, you'll think about it for days. What would you do if a killer forced you into his car? You'd be terrified. You'd do anything he said. Your only goal would be to survive. Now, what would you do if that same killer, a week later, handed you cash, sent you into a store alone, and told you to buy bullets for his gun? The answer isn't so simple anymore, is it? This is the story of Mary Rice. For 7 days in February 2017, she was the companion of a spree killer named Billy Boyette. Together, they left a trail of grief across 3 states. The police first thought she was his victim, kidnapped and terrified. Then, they became convinced she was his partner, helping him hunt. So which was it? A captive or an accomplice? The jury gave their answer. But to understand it, we have to walk through those 7 days, hour by hour, and look at the 7 terrifying moments where Mary Rice could have changed her story, but didn't. This isn't just a crime story. This is a map of a nightmare. A step-by-step journey across the blurriest line that exists, the line between being forced to do something and choosing to do it. Let's go back to the beginning. To understand the trap, you first have to understand the man who built it. The city of Milton, Florida, in 2017, was the kind of place where people still believed in second chances. It was also a place where a man named Billy Boyette kept using up all of his. Billy wasn't a mysterious stranger. He was a known entity. To the police, he was a file folder of violent arrests, for domestic battery, for kidnapping, for holding a knife to a woman's throat. To the courts, he was a frustrating case. Victims, paralyzed by fear, would often refuse to testify, and charges would dissolve. The system would sigh, release him, and wait for the next call. He was a storm cloud that everyone could see, but no one seemed able to stop. In late 2016, Billy started writing letters to a woman named Mary Rice. She was 37, a mother of 2, working at a Waffle House. Her life had not been easy. Friends described her as kind, but vulnerable. A person who had been taken advantage of before. A person who wanted to see the good in people. When Billy was released from prison, he didn't just look Mary up. He moved into her trailer. It was a rapid, intense romance. To an outsider, it was a red flag. To someone who craved connection, it might have felt like rescue. Then, Billy's old patterns emerged. Jealousy, rage, control. His focus turned to another woman, his ex-girlfriend, Alicia Greer. When Alicia tried to break free, filing charges after a brutal attack, Billy's obsession curdled into something final. On January 31st, he found Alicia and her friend Jacqueline Moore hiding in a room at the Emerald Sands Inn. What happened inside that room was quick and brutal. 6 shots from a .38 caliber revolver. 2 lives ended. Billy Boyette was now a murderer. And at that moment, covered in the evidence of what he'd done, he made a decision. He wouldn't run alone. He drove to the one place he knew he could still command, Mary Rice's home. Picture this. It's the middle of the night. The world is asleep. A pounding on your door. You open it. There stands Billy. He's wild-eyed. There's blood on him. He's holding a gun. He doesn't ask. He tells you. He says he just killed Alicia. He says the police are coming for him. He says you need to pack a bag, right now. Your mind is screaming. Your children are asleep down the hall. He looks at you, and he says the words that freeze your soul. Do what I say, or I will find your kids and kill them too. What is your choice? There is no choice. Not really. This is the ultimate coercion. This is the primal trigger. The threat isn't just against you. It's against the most precious parts of your life. Your survival instinct is no longer about you. It's a shield you become for others. So Mary packed a bag. She left her pets. She left her life. She got into the car with a murderer. In that moment, by any definition, Mary Rice became a hostage. A victim. Her will was replaced by his. Her only path was obedience. This is the foundation of her entire defense. It's the why for everything that comes next. A fear so deep, so all-consuming, that it rewires your brain. You are not thinking about the future, or escape, or justice. You are thinking about the next 5 minutes. The next command. You are thinking, what do I have to do to stop him from hurting my children? The car pulls away from Milton. The first crime scene is growing cold behind them. Ahead is only darkness and road. And here is where the story, and our understanding, begins to twist. Because the police, once they realized Mary was with him, put out an alert. They said she was in danger and in the company of Billy Boyette. They treated her as a potential second victim. But Billy and Mary weren't just hiding. They were moving. And to move, you need things. Gas, food, supplies. Which leads us, less than 48 hours after the first murders, to a brightly lit Walmart in Crestview, Florida. This is chance number 1. The black SUV Billy's mother had rented pulls into the parking lot. Mary gets out. Billy stays in the driver's seat. Watch her on the security footage. She walks into the store alone. She is not running to the customer service desk. She is not scribbling a note for a cashier. She is not causing a scene. She goes to the sporting goods section. She picks up 2 boxes of .38 caliber ammunition, the exact caliber of the murder weapon. She gets a sleeping bag, some hand warmers. She goes to the checkout. She pays. She walks back out to the car, where Billy is waiting, and gets in. From the outside, it looks normal. It looks like an errand. This is the first crack in the simple story of hostage. A hostage, alone in a public place, surrounded by people, with a killer waiting outside, has a window. However small, however risky, it exists. She did not take it. Why? The prosecution would later say this was proof. She was provisioning for their life on the run. She was a willing participant, buying the very bullets that might kill again. But consider the mind of a hostage in that Walmart aisle. The threat isn't locked in the car outside. The threat is a permanent voice in her head. I will find your children. I will kill them. If you try anything, I will know, and I will make you watch. In that state, is a crowded store a place of rescue, or a terrifying maze where any wrong move could trigger the unthinkable? Is buying the bullets an act of complicity, or the most desperate act of obedience, giving the tiger what it wants so it doesn't turn on you? We see a simple choice, run or don't run. But inside her skull, the choice might have been possible, terrifying, uncertain escape versus certain, immediate, and catastrophic death for the people I love. The car drives away from the Walmart. They have what they need. The spree is no longer a frantic escape. It has a purpose, and Billy's purpose was not to hide. It was to hunt. This response is AI generated, for reference only. Continue. The supplies from Walmart weren't for a long hideout. They were for a journey. Billy Boyette wasn't thinking like a fugitive trying to disappear. He was thinking like a predator moving to new hunting grounds. The fear he had instilled in Mary was the fuel. And that fuel took them out of Florida and into the quiet, trusting heart of Lillian, Alabama. Lillian was the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked, where everyone knew their neighbors. It was a community that felt insulated from the chaos you saw on the news. That feeling was its vulnerability. In the early morning darkness of February 3rd, a woman named Peggy Braz finished a long shift as a respiratory therapist. She was tired, but she was planning her retirement. A new grandchild was on the way. Her life was a tapestry of quiet service and family joy. She pulled her white Chrysler Concorde into her driveway, home at last. She never made it inside. Billy Boyette was waiting. He wanted her car. To him, Peggy Braz wasn't a person with a family, with a life about to be celebrated. She was an opportunity, a resource, a woman alone. A single gunshot tore through the morning quiet. And here, the story presents us with chance number 2. This is the moment that would later become the center of the hurricane during Mary's trial. What was Mary doing while Billy murdered Peggy Braz? According to the police and the security footage they would present in court, the story was clear. The black SUV and Peggy's white Concorde were seen together. But in this grinding haze of fear and exhaustion, something else can happen. A perverse kind of bonding. Psychologists call it trauma bonding, or the infamous Stockholm Syndrome. It's not about affection. It's about survival. When your entire world shrinks to one person, the source of all your terror, and your only source of food, direction, and minimal safety, your mind can perform a terrible trick. It can start to see their survival as linked to your own. You may start to seek their approval, to avoid their rage, not just out of fear, but out of a desperate, distorted need to stabilize the only reality you have left. You are no longer just trying to survive him. You are, in a warped way, trying to survive with him. And this leads us to the most chilling moment of all. Chance number 3. Somewhere in the backwoods of Florida, Billy decided they needed another gun. He found an advertisement. A man was selling a rifle. This wasn't a Walmart. This wasn't a crowded, anonymous store. This was a private sale. At a man's home. In his front yard. Billy gave Mary cash. He sent her to do the deal. Alone. Think about this scene. Mary Rice, in the stolen white Concorde, pulls up to a stranger's house. The seller comes out. He sees a woman. He does not see Billy Boyette. Billy is elsewhere, waiting. She gets out of the car. She talks to the man. She hands him the money. He hands her the rifle. They complete the transaction. The man who sold that gun would later testify in court. He was asked a devastating question. If this lady had asked you for help, or to call 911, would you have helped her? His answer, of course. He was on his own property. He was armed. He was a perfect, willing shield. This was more than a chance. This was a fortress of safety being handed to her. All she had to do was say one sentence. Help me. The man with me is a killer. She didn't. She took the rifle, got back in the car, and drove away. Why? Why? By this point, the simple hostage explanation strains to its breaking point for an outside observer. The prosecution would brandish this moment as the final, undeniable proof. She was a willing partner, arming her accomplice. But let's crawl inside the logic of fear one more time. If the threat to her children is the absolute, unshakable core of her reality, then no shield is perfect. This armed stranger could help her right now, but could he protect her children hours from now, states away? Billy had promised he would kill them if she betrayed him. In her mind, was that a bluff? Or was it a certainty? When the stakes are imagined to be that high, no opportunity feels safe enough. The devil you know, whose rules you understand, can feel safer than the angel whose protection might come too late. Furthermore, the shared trauma has deepened. She has now witnessed, or believes she has witnessed, multiple murders. She has been living in his nightmare for days. The outside world has become an abstract concept. The real world is the car, the woods, and Billy's rage. Stepping out of that reality, even into safety, might have felt as terrifying and impossible as jumping from a moving train. The rifle is now in the car. The danger escalates. Billy is no longer just a man with a revolver. He is a man with options. And his hunt is about to enter its final, most devastating phase. The fear in the communities had reached a fever pitch. Police warnings were constant. Do not travel alone. Lock your doors. This couple is random, ruthless, and armed. The public was looking for a black SUV and a white Concorde. So Billy needed another car. A new victim. He found her in Beulah, Florida. A young mother named Kayla Crocker. On the morning of February 6th, Billy and Mary targeted Kayla's home. Her 18-month-old son was inside. What happened in that house is the final descent. This is chance number 4, and it is different from all the others. It is not a chance to run. It is a chance to refuse to participate. Mary would admit she went inside. She would admit that, at Billy's direction, she took shoelaces and rope. She tied Kayla Crocker's hands. She tied her to a piece of furniture. She physically restrained another human being, a young mother, in her own home, with her child nearby. Then, she says, she went outside. She says she heard a single gunshot from within the house. Whether she pulled the trigger or not would become a legal technicality. But by tying Kayla up, she had already crossed a moral event horizon. She was no longer just a bystander to Billy's violence. She had become an instrument of it. Her hands had directly facilitated the crime. In that moment, the last vestige of the kidnapped victim persona shattered. Survival had morphed into something darker. To save herself and her children from a threat, she had made a conscious, physical choice to endanger another mother and her child. The line wasn't just blurred now. For Kayla Crocker, lying bound on her floor, that line did not exist. There were only 2 aggressors in her home. Kayla was rushed to the hospital, but would not survive. The stolen Concorde was found abandoned with a flat tire. Billy and Mary were now in Kayla's blue Chevrolet Cobalt. The world was closing in. The biggest manhunt in the region's history was on their heels. They drove. They didn't know it, but they were driving toward the end. The chaos and the fear and the sleepless nights were about to collide with a cold, concrete wall in West Point, Georgia. And in a small, nondescript motel room, the final choice would be made. Not by Mary Rice, but by Billy Boyette. He would look at his companion, whether he saw a partner or a possession, and in his last act of control, he would let her walk out the door into the arms of the SWAT team. Then, alone, he would put the .38 caliber revolver to his head. The 7-day nightmare was over. The sound of the sirens was replaced by a chilling silence. And Mary Rice, alive, traumatized, and handcuffed, would have to begin the impossible task of explaining the inexplicable. She would have to stand before a world that had seen the receipts, the footage, the timeline, and make them understand the prison that existed inside her own mind. A prison with no bars, but with walls made of pure, paralyzing terror. The legal trial was about to begin. But in the court of public opinion, the verdict was already being debated. Was the woman in those handcuffs the last victim of Billy Boyette's spree? Or was she his first and most crucial accomplice? The evidence was all on the table. But to understand the verdict, we have to step out of the car, out of the woods, and into the sterile, bright light of the courtroom, where stories are dissected, and why is the only thing that matters. This response is AI-generated, for reference only. Continue. The silence after the gunshot in that Georgia motel room was the loudest sound of all. For Mary Rice, the 7-day sprint through a nightmare was over. But the slow, grinding process of judgment was just beginning. She was no longer running from Billy Boyette. Now, she had to explain herself to the world. And the world had a very simple, very damning story to tell. It was written in receipts. It was captured on security tapes. It was a story of action, not intention. The prosecution's case was a cold, clear timeline. A map of complicity. They showed the jury the Walmart receipt. She bought the bullets. They showed the security footage from Alabama. She switched the cars after Peggy Bras was killed. They argued the duct tape to a tree story was a clumsy, impossible fairy tale. They brought in the man who sold the rifle. She had a perfect chance to ask for help, face to face with an armed citizen on his own property. She bought a gun instead. And they focused, with devastating weight, on the home of Kayla Crocker. She didn't just watch. She participated. Her hands tied the knots. She made the choice to walk into that house and help restrain another mother. This was not a story about a mind, or fear, or invisible threats. This was a story about deeds. About what was done. And what was done, the state argued, made Mary Rice a murderer. The narrative was powerful because it was logical. It followed the visible evidence from point A to point B to point C. It painted a picture of a woman who, for whatever reason, chose to stay, chose to help, chose to become part of the chaos. But then, the defense stood up, and they asked the jury to do something much harder than follow a timeline. They asked them to imagine a prison they could not see. The defense did not deny the deeds. They denied the choice. They presented a different map. Not a map of roads and stores, but a map of a psyche under siege. They started with Billy Boyette, not just the killer on the run, but the manipulator, the abuser, the man who had spent months grooming Mary's loyalty before switching to pure terror. They talked about the history of Mary Rice, a life marked by victimization, by being used, by seeking safety in the wrong places. They argued she was the perfect target, a woman whose instincts to trust and comply had been weaponized against her long before Billy showed up bloody at her door. And then, they focused on the threat. Not the abstract threat of jail, but the specific, visceral threat Billy uttered that first night. I will find your kids and kill them. This, the defense argued, was the key that locked every door. This was the reason the Walmart was not a sanctuary. It was a test. This was the reason the gun seller was not a rescuer. He was a potential trigger for a catastrophic punishment she believed would happen hundreds of miles away. They brought in experts to talk about the psychology of coercive control, and traumatic bonding. They explain that a threat against one's children doesn't just inspire fear. It can inspire a form of catatonic obedience. Your brain doesn't weigh options. It follows the one rule that might keep them safe. Do exactly what he says. Do not deviate. Do not think. Just obey. The duct tape story, they argued, wasn't a lie. It was a metaphor for her entire reality. She was tied down, not by plastic, but by a terror so complete it immobilized her will. The trial became a clash of two fundamentally different realities. The prosecutor's reality, a world of actions. You bought the bullets, you are complicit. You tied the knots, you are responsible. The why is interesting, but it doesn't erase the what. The defense's reality, a world of perceptions. She perceived her children's lives were on the line. That perception, true or not, was her reality. And in that reality, every choice was an illusion. Every chance was a trap. The jury was asked to decide, which world did Mary Rice inhabit? The most haunting testimony didn't come from a police officer or an expert. It came from a clerk at an Alabama Dollar General store. She had rung up Billy and Mary during their run. The prosecutor asked her about Mary's demeanor. How did she appear to you? Scared. Then, the clerk recounted something Billy had said at the register. Casually, like he was commenting on the weather. He looked at her and said, "I just killed my girlfriend." The clerk, stunned, thought he was joking. She finished the transaction. They left. The defense seized on this. Look, they implied. Even a stranger, in a 5-minute interaction, could see the fear on Mary's face. Even a stranger could hear the monstrous, casual cruelty of the man controlling her. This was the atmosphere she was breathing. Every minute of every day. But the prosecution had its own haunting piece of evidence. The old text messages. Months before the spree, Mary and Billy had exchanged "I love yous." They had a romantic relationship. This, the state argued, was the foundation. She wasn't a random victim snatched off the street. She was a woman in love with a dangerous man, who then found herself in too deep and made a series of terrible, conscious decisions to stay by his side. So who was she? The vulnerable pen pal who fell for a monster? Or the willing girlfriend who became a partner in crime? The jury heard it all. They saw the calm woman in the Walmart. They heard about the woman duct taped to a tree. They saw the woman buying a rifle alone. They heard about the woman whose hands bound Kayla Crocker. They deliberated for 2 hours. 2 hours to untangle a week of chaos and a lifetime of damage. 2 hours to decide which reality was real. The verdict was swift, and it was absolute. Guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Kayla Crocker. Guilty of being an accessory after the fact for the deaths of Alicia Greer and Jacqueline Moore. The legal system had spoken. In the clear, bright light of the law, Mary Rice had crossed the line. Her actions made her guilty. The threat to her children, while tragic, did not justify the choice to help take an innocent life. She was sentenced to life in prison. So, is that the end of the story? The jury gave us an answer. But did they answer the question? The question we started with. At what precise moment does a victim become a participant? The law draws that line with a bold, black marker. It says the line was crossed, definitively, when Mary Rice entered Kayla Crocker's home and picked up that rope. Before that, maybe she was a victim. After that, she was a criminal. But human psychology doesn't work with bold lines. It works in shadows, in gradients, in slow fades. Perhaps the more uncomfortable truth is that there wasn't one single moment. Maybe it was a descent. A slippery slope paved with terror. Step 1. You are a victim. He threatens your children. Your will is erased. Step 2. You obey a small order. Pack a bag. You are still a victim. Step 3. You obey a worse order. Go buy supplies. The outside world starts to see you differently. You start to feel the weight of that. Step 4. You are implicated. You're in a stolen car. The world now sees you as part of the crime. A new fear of punishment joins the old fear of the killer. Step 5. You obey an order that directly harms another. You tie the knots. In that moment, to the new victim, you are not a victim at all. You are the danger. At which step did she change? Was it at step 3, in the Walmart aisle? Or at step 5, in Kayla's nursery? Or was she, in her own mind, the same terrified person from step 1 all the way through to step 5, just doing increasingly terrible things to satisfy the same, unshakable, primal fear? This is the disturbing legacy of the Mary Rice case. It forces us to stare into that gray zone. We want our stories simple. Heroes and villains. Monsters and innocents. Billy Boyette was a monster. That's easy. But Mary Rice, she is the human puzzle. She is the mirror. Her story asks us the hardest question of all. What do we believe we would have done? It's easy to say, I would have run at the Walmart. It's easy to say, I would have screamed for help from the gun seller. We say that from our safe chairs, in our quiet rooms, with our rational minds. But can we really know? Can we truly imagine the sound of his voice promising to murder your children? Can we simulate the bone-deep exhaustion of days without sleep, the paranoia of constant watchfulness, the distorted logic where the man holding the gun becomes the only source of truth in your universe? The jury's verdict tells us that society cannot function if we excuse all actions born from fear. We must hold a line. We must say that some deeds, no matter why you think you're doing them, are so heinous that you must be held accountable. But her story whispers a warning, that the line between victim and accomplice is not a wall. It is a narrow, shaky bridge over an abyss of fear. And under enough pressure, almost anyone can be pushed across it. Mary Rice will spend the rest of her life in prison, a final verdict written in stone. But the question she leaves us with hangs in the air, much harder to capture, impossible to lock away. Can a person be a hostage of circumstance and an agent of evil at the very same time? The evidence says yes. The law says yes. But the human heart struggles to understand how. And perhaps that struggle, that refusal to fully understand, is the only thing that keeps us from the edge of that abyss ourselves. This response is AI-generated, for reference only. Continue. The courtroom doors closed. The life sentence began. But the story of Mary Rice doesn't end with the clang of a cell door. It splinters. It becomes a different kind of story, one about memory, legacy, and the unfinished business of trauma. While Mary Rice sits in a Florida prison, the echoes of those 7 days continue to reverberate in the lives she shattered and the legal system that judged her. First, let's talk about what was left behind. For women were dead. For families were plunged into a grief that does not end with a verdict. For them, Mary Rice is not a psychological puzzle. She is a part of the mechanism of their loss. Whether coerced or willing, her hands were involved. The law's decision to hold her accountable brings a measure of closure, but it cannot answer the why that haunts a grieving mother or a fatherless child. For them, the gray zone is an academic concept. Their pain is black and white. Then, there is the unresolved chapter in Alabama. Mary Rice was convicted in Florida for the murder of Kayla Crocker. But for the killing of Peggy Braz and Lillian, Alabama still has a capital murder charge waiting. The local district attorney has made it clear they intend to bring her to trial, and they will seek the death penalty. This presents a bizarre, legal limbo. Florida has her. She is serving life plus 30 years. Alabama wants her. Legal experts say it could be decades before Florida might release her to face that second trial. So Peggy Braz's family waits. They wait for a justice that is promised but postponed, caught in the slow-moving gears of interstate bureaucracy and appeals. For them, the story is cruelly unfinished. And what of Mary Rice herself? In prison, she becomes another kind of case study. Is she a model prisoner, a remorseful woman reflecting on the unthinkable choices fear forced upon her? Or is she a manipulator, playing the victim once more within a new system of rules? The letters she wrote after her arrest, claiming she didn't deserve to be in this cage, suggest a woman who fundamentally views herself as wrongly condemned, not for her actions, but for her intentions. This is the ultimate divide. Mary Rice lives in the world of her intentions, a world of perceived threats and survival logic. The state put her in a cage for her actions, the bullets, the car switch, the rope. Which world is more real? Perhaps the most chilling lesson of this entire story is that they are both real. They existed simultaneously. The world of terror in her mind was her absolute reality. And the world of physical evidence and consequence in Florida and Alabama is ours. The trial was the catastrophic collision of those two realities. So, let's return to our original hook, our simple question that unfurled into this complex nightmare. What would you do if the man threatening to kill you handed you the gun? We now see the question was incomplete. The gun isn't handed to you in a vacuum. It's handed to you on the 7th day of a journey through hell. By that point, you haven't slept. You've seen death. You've been told every day that your children's lives are currency for your obedience. The outside world no longer feels like salvation. It feels like a blinding, judging light. The man handing you the gun isn't just a killer. He's become the entire architecture of your world. What would you do? Maybe you still believe you'd drop the gun. You'd run. You'd be a hero. But Mary Rice's story asks you to consider a darker, more uncomfortable possibility. That by the time he hands you the gun, you might not even see it as a choice anymore. You might just see it as the next task. The next requirement for survival in the only reality you have left. The you who would have run at the Walmart might have already been erased, replaced by a survival automaton programmed by terror. This is not an excuse. It is an explanation. And the space between those two words is where this whole tragedy lives. The legacy of Billy Boyette and Mary Rice is not just a true crime footnote. It is a stark map of the limits of human empathy. We can understand fear. We can understand abuse. But our understanding fractures when that fear leads someone to assist in the harm of another innocent person. Our compassion hits a wall. We draw the line. The jury drew it at Kayla Crocker's bedroom door. The system is designed to draw these lines. It must. But this case reminds us that the lines we draw in the clear light of day are sometimes drawn through the darkest, most confused terrain of the human psyche. Mary Rice's story ends where it began, in a room. Not a motel room stained with blood, but a prison cell. A room where she is both punished and protected. A room that is the physical manifestation of society's verdict on her actions. But outside that room, the questions she embodies are still free. They wander. They unsettle. Can extreme fear become a form of insanity? When does survival stop being a defense? How much of our choice is simply a product of the prison, visible or invisible, that we find ourselves in? We locked away the person, but we could not lock away the questions. And perhaps that is the point. The uncomfortable, lingering echo of this case is not meant to make us excuse the inexcusable. It is meant to make us humble. To acknowledge that the human spirit, under enough pressure, can bend into shapes we don't recognize and would never wish to see in the mirror. Billy Boyette was a monster. That is simple. Mary Rice was human. That is the terrifying part. For a story so full of noise, gunshots, sirens, gavels, and shouted warnings, it ends in a silence that asks more than any sound ever could. We followed the trail. We looked at the evidence. We heard the theories of the courtroom. We tried to walk in the footsteps of a woman who walked through a nightmare. And now, we are left here. Not with an answer, but with a reflection. Look at the facts one last time, stripped bare of all their psychology and legal argument. A woman bought bullets for a killer. A woman was seen moving cars after a murder. A woman purchased a rifle from a stranger who would have helped her. A woman tied another woman up, who was then shot. These are the stones on the path. You can line them up and they lead, inexorably, to a prison cell. That path is clear. It is the path the jury walked. But beside that path of stones, there is another path. One made of whispers and shadows and things that never showed up on a receipt. The path of a whispered threat in the dead of night. I will find your children. The path of a mind unraveling over 168 hours of relentless fear. The path of a world shrinking until it contains only two people, you, and the source of all your terror. This path is not made of stones. It is made of smoke. You cannot build a case on it. You cannot send it to prison. But you cannot dismiss it, either. Because to ignore it is to believe that human beings are only what they do, and never why they think they're doing it. That is the true, unsettling core of this story. It is a collision between the world of actions and the world of reasons. Our society, our justice, must live in the world of actions. It must be so. We must be held accountable for what we do, for the tangible harm we cause. Otherwise, there is no order, only chaos and excuses. But our humanity lives in the world of reasons. We know that a shove in anger is different from a shove to save someone from a falling brick. The action is the same. The reason changes everything. Mary Rice presented a reason so profound, so primal, the survival of her children, that she asks the justice system to look past her actions. The system looked, considered, and then said, "We see your reason. But the action of tying up Kayla Crocker is too great. Your reason, however real to you, does not erase her death." And so, we arrive at the quiet, uncomfortable truth this story leaves in its wake. Sometimes, understanding why does not mean forgiving what. We can map the terror. We can chart the coercion. We can grant that Mary Rice's internal prison was, in those 7 days, perhaps more real to her than any cell. We can understand why she might have done the things she did. But understanding is not absolution. The families of Alicia, Jacqueline, Peggy, and Kayla live in the world of what? The irreversible, devastating what? For them, the why is a footnote in an obituary. It doesn't bring back a mother, a daughter, a friend. So, we are left holding two truths that cannot be reconciled. Mary Rice was likely a victim of Billy Boyette's profound, psychological tyranny. Mary Rice became an agent of profound, physical harm to other victims. Both are true. To deny the first is to ignore the science of trauma and the reality of evil's power to warp. To deny the second is to betray the memory of the women who died and insult the very concept of justice. There is no clean resolution, no satisfying click of a puzzle piece falling into place. There is only the holding of this tension. Perhaps, then, the final purpose of this story is not to solve, but to sober. It is a reminder that evil is not always a monster in a dark alley. Sometimes it is a process, a chain reaction. It starts with a choice to inflict violence, like Billy's, and it can propagate through a system of fear, compelling others to carry its terrible momentum forward. It is a warning about the prisons we cannot see, the prisons of fear, of manipulation, of desperate love, and how easily they can make us complicit in building prisons of concrete and steel for ourselves. And it is a plea, etched in tragedy, to look at the people around us, to see the vulnerable, the isolated, the ones seeking connection in dangerous places. Because Billy Boyette didn't find Mary Rice in a vacuum. He found her in a world that had already left its marks on her.